Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing, again, I say this a lot recently, a long overdue video on my CZ P-01. Now this is a gun that I've been actually actively carrying for over a year now. This is a gun you may have seen in a couple other videos, a couple other reviews that I've done on the channel, or at least popping up here and there. It's something I've done quite a bit of shooting with. We are now over 1,000 rounds with this thing. We've actually been over 1,000 rounds for a while, thanks to PMC ammo. But I'm excited to actually finally be doing my video on this because this is a pistol that I really enjoy a lot. And when you're in love, you want to shout it from the rooftops. So we'll dig into this thing a little bit more, but let's go ahead and cut in some shooting footage with it, and then we'll talk more about the P-01. So I want to begin a little bit with my history with CZ. CZ is a company that I ignored, unfortunately, for a really long time. One of my friends that I've done a lot of training with, you've seen him on the channel here quite a bit, has been carrying a CZ pistol for a long time. Started with a PCR, which is very similar to this. Then he upgraded to a P-01. He kept trying to get me on the CZ train, and I kept kind of ignoring it, think it was that weird kind of hipster European pistol. However, let's see, about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, I was doing a video for my employer, Mazama Sporting Goods, and we got in a used P-01 Omega that was suppressor ready. And so I was doing a video for the store. You can check out the Mazama Sporting Goods videos. I'll have a link to that YouTube channel down below. Basically, I do the videos for them as well. But I was like, wow, this is a really great pistol. Why have I been ignoring it? And then lo and behold, not too long after that, we got in this NATO green model in, which I didn't even know was a thing at the time, and apparently it's not a super common thing. But when that came in, I decided, you know what, now's the time. I'm going to go ahead and get one. And it's been kind of a match made in heaven ever since. Like I said, I've actively been carrying this pistol for my everyday carry for over a year now, and I just am really happy with this thing. So I guess if that's all you needed to hear, like, do I recommend it? Yes, 100% I recommend it. Not for everybody though. So if you want to see me kind of qualify that statement or quantify that statement even, definitely stick around, because it's definitely something that I think is worth consideration for a lot of people, but again, not necessarily for everyone. Now, so like I said, I do have quite a bit of time in with this pistol now. A lot of that, again, thanks to PMC ammo. PMC and I got working together right before COVID hit, and they sent me out 1,000 rounds of ammo to pump through this pistol here. So without that, I probably would not have been able to get 1,000 rounds through this pistol nearly as quickly as I did. I've been shooting PMC ammo for a really long time. It was awesome when they asked if I would be interested in them providing ammo for reviews. Again, that was in the before time. Things have obviously changed since then, and I don't blame them for not wanting to give out ammo for free for reviews when they can't even keep up with the current demand out there. So we don't have that situation anymore, but they are the ones that did provide the ammo for the bulk of the testing of this pistol. Again, at least to get it to 1,000 rounds, and I've done, again, quite a bit more shooting on top of that. But let's go ahead and dive into the features of the CZ P-01. There's a lot, if you're coming from the striker-fired world, there's a lot going on here, even though it's kind of still a fairly simple and straightforward pistol. So let's go ahead and jump in, starting with, again, something that really sets it apart from striker-fired pistols, and that's the double action, single action trigger. So if you have experience with double action, single action triggers, I apologize because this is going to be some basic Barney level stuff. But for those of you who really only have experience with striker fired pistols like your Glocks and even some other CZs out there, the main difference is the way that the trigger operates. On a striker fired trigger, you have the same exact trigger pull every single time from your first shot of the magazine to the last shot in the magazine. With a double action, single action semi-automatic pistol, very similar to a double action, single action revolver, the trigger can be performing either a single action or it can be performing two actions or double action, and that is either releasing the hammer or both cocking and then releasing the hammer. So the standard way that people are going to carry a double action, single action pistol is going to be with the hammer forward, which means at that point, if I needed to fire the pistol, I'm going to pull back on the trigger here and you'll watch that hammer move back to the rear. And then once it reaches far enough back, it's going to then release that hammer back forward. Now, after I do that, again, pull the trigger, it cocks the hammer back and then releases it. That will cause a round to fire, and then you'll see that the hammer is going to be staying back in that rearward position, at which point all I have to do then is, again, release it to reset, and then I just pull the trigger with a nice, short, crisp trigger pull and release that trigger again. I could, if I wanted to, cock the hammer back manually on the first shot. However, I don't think that that's necessarily a good a tactically sound thing to do. Some people are going to disagree with me, but it is theoretically an option out there. Now, one thing that this does is it allows me to have a double strike ability. So if I fire the round, or if I attempt to fire the round and it doesn't go off, I can just continue to pull the trigger and hope that it goes off. Not necessarily something I want to do, but there are people who will talk about that being an attribute. Do with that information what you will. To me, if the round in the chamber is not going off, I would rather just get that one out and get another one in and increase the likelihood of the gun actually going off when I pull the trigger. Now, one thing you might have seen me do already is decocking the pistol. So if I move it over to the other side here, there are other versions of the P-01 where this is ambidextrous, but on this model, it's only going to be on the one side. Because I have a short, crisp trigger pull, and actually let me demonstrate this real quick. If you look at the hammer here, as I cock the hammer back, it's going to move the trigger to the rear. That is going to allow this thing to have again, a short, crisp trigger pull. However, it is too light and too crisp for this thing to be safely carried with the hammer back and the trigger to the rear, only with a decocker model. So I can push down on this lever here on the side, and what that's going to do is it's going to release the hammer back forward almost to a half cock position and then move the trigger all the way back to the front, so that my safety now is that long and heavy trigger pull, again, more similar to like a double action revolver. So that is the configuration in which I carry it, round in the chamber with the pistol decocked, so that I have to again, I don't have to worry about safeties or anything like that. I just pull the pistol out of the holster, get it on target, and then do a nice, slow, steady trigger press. Now, as I alluded to, there are Omega models of the CZ P-01 that are going to allow you to either have it in a decocker configuration like this one, albeit an ambidextrous one, as well as having the option to have a safety on it, in which case you could carry cocked and locked and just have that single action trigger pull every single time. It's going to come down to personal preference. Personally, I prefer the decocker only model. I'm not going to run it with a safety. I don't like having a switch that makes my gun stop working if I don't absolutely need it, like you do on a single action firearm. So again, do with that information what you will. I prefer the decocker only model, and it seems like there's a lot of people out there, especially guys who upgrade their pistols, who tend to agree with that. Also, this is the only configuration in which you're going to get the NATO green version of it. Now, again, that was kind of a big rabbit trail talking about double action, single action triggers, but again, that's one thing that's going to separate this out from what I'm sure a lot of people watching this video are going to be more familiar with. Now, moving on to some of the other features of this pistol, we have night sights already installed out of the box. Now, CZ has a couple different versions of night sights. Some of their pistols are going to come with actual tritium night sights. This, I don't remember what they refer to it as, but it's more of like a photoluminescent light. So it does have to be exposed to some sort of natural light, at least a little bit, in order for them to glow. However, they will glow for a long period of time after being exposed to natural light. So if you're carrying in the afternoon or evening or anything like that, and you pull your firearm out in a dark parking lot or whatever the situation is, you should still have the ability to see your sights, no problem. I'll put it this way, I've never found myself in a position where when I pulled the firearm out, I didn't have them glowing. Now, it's not bright enough that you're going to see it during the day, but at night you will still be able to see your sights. So that is a really nice thing. It's nice that I don't feel like I have to replace these sights right out the gate. To me, they're perfectly serviceable. There are some options out there, not nearly as many options as there are for, say, SIGs or Glocks or anything like that, but there are aftermarket options for sights on the CZ pistols. But again, I haven't felt the need to replace those myself. Now, this is going to maintain a lot of the features that the full-size CZ75 have and some of the other compacts and PCRs out on the market. So, for example, probably one of the big kind of visual distinctions of CZ pistols is the kind of reversed rail system. So instead of the slide wrapping around the frame wraps around the slide. So that's why the slide appears to be so short. Now, what that does is it does reduce the amount of reciprocating mass because the slide is shorter than it would be on most striker-fired pistols or other double-action, single-action pistols that don't have that rail setup. So that's going to reduce the felt recoil. However, the counter side to that is it also makes it more difficult to manipulate the slide. You really have to be very diligent to actually get your hands on the texturing, either in the front or at the rear, to be able to positively rack the slide. I've never been a huge fan of kind of like the slingshot pinch between my thumb and index finger. However, I have found myself having to resort to that more often with this pistol because when I come over the top, I tend to grab too low onto the frame and completely miss the slide altogether. So that is something to consider if you're a real big proponent of coming over the top and gripping and ripping it. The CZ pistols are gonna take a lot of practice to make that an efficient movement. And also, when I'm talking about dropping the slide on a reload, I was, again, a huge proponent of the grip and rip. However, I have found myself on several occasions kind of sliding off the slide or missing the slide altogether. So as much as I used to be a big, I used to be really against using the slide lock or slide release, which on the texturing on this, it's definitely intended to be a release as well. I now insert my magazine, then use my support hand thumb to drop the slide and then get my sights on target. So I've had to basically relearn a manual of arms to be compatible with this pistol. Whether or not it's going to be worth it for you to do that or whether you'll need to do that is going to be up to you. Again, in my cost-benefit analysis, this pistol was worth that effort. But again, we'll get to that later. Now, like I was mentioning earlier, some of the other CZ75 compacts, the PCRs, are going to be pretty much the same silhouette as this one. However, what the P-01 does differently from the compact and the PCR is I now have an accessory rail. I'm a huge proponent of having a white light on any firearm that I'm going to be using for self-defense. Now, I know I can't wait to read what some of the comments are, but the light that I've been running on this thing has been an Olight PL Mini, the original PL Mini, not the PL Mini 2. Now, I've done a review of this Olight. I know that Olight is just a trigger word for so many people out there, and to an extent, I understand it. I just think Olight's the kind of the cool company to hate right now. I can tell you, I have run this light a lot, and I have even run it through force on force classes where this thing's getting dropped and kicked around, and there's even a little bit of pink paint on it from where it actually took a UTM round straight to the lens. This thing just keeps on working. It holds its battery well, and so far at least, it's never caught my pants on fire or blown my face open by holding this in my teeth. Now, I do actually plan on swapping out to probably a Streamlight light here in the near future, but that's mostly to test out those new Streamlights as opposed to wanting to replace the Olight, because again, this has actually done really well for me. Now, this is not a blanket voicing of support for Olight products as a whole. I can just say that I have thoroughly vetted this specific light, and not even the whole product line, just this specific one, and it's held up to all the abuse that I've put it through, and it does everything I need it to. So again, can't wait to see what some of the comments are, because I know there's going to be a lot of people losing it in the comment section, so that should be fun. But moving on, one of my favorite things about the P-01 is the thing that really sold me on it right out the gate, and that's just the way it feels. Now, I know people like VSO Gun Channel hate it when people say that a gun fits their hand better, because obviously the part that's made to be held by a human hand is comfortable to hold on to. But I have relatively small hands, you know, the Whopper Jr., Donald Trump hands, whatever you want to call it, and certain pistols are just not easy for me to get a good positive grip on. And the contouring of the CZ pistols matched with the kind of rubberized and contoured grips that they come with out of the box, I'm just a huge fan of. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who don't like it, and one of the first things they do with their CZ75 compacts or P-01s or PCRs is swap these out. Again, the grips out of the box are really what kind of sold me on it, or at least made me want to look deeper into it, and I couldn't be happier with it. Again, shooting here in Oregon, your hands get wet a lot. Even in the summer, you're wearing sunscreen that gets on your hands. Guns can be hard to hold on to. Again, it's like having a Hogue grip like on your AR, where you just get that nice rubberized texture, or like one of the Magpul Plus grips, and I personally really like that. So again, not for everybody, but whoever's hands they use to design this must have the exact same hands as me. Although the weird thing is, my manager at work, who has nearly identical hands to me, hates these grips. So, you know, I get it. It's one of those things where you might love it, you might hate it, and really the only way to find out is to actually get hands-on with one. Now, magazine capacity on these guys is going to be standard 14+1. At least that's what the factory mags are going to come with. If you get the suppressor-ready models, they'll usually come with the +2 base plates for 16 rounds. However, Metgar, who it's my understanding they make OEM mags for CZ, makes a 15-round flush-fitting magazine for the P-01, so you can get back up to like your Glock 19 capacity of 15+1. Honestly, 14+1 isn't terrible. I'm totally okay with that if that's what I was stuck with, and honestly, that's what I personally carry, are the two. I carry one of the factory mags that came with it in the gun, the other factory mag that came with it as my backup. I do use the Metgar mags for training, and I would feel comfortable carrying them if I wanted to. It's just, I just have this thing where I just want to carry OEM mags. Again, I know Metgar does make the OEM mags, but it's just the thing I have. So do with that information, again, what you will. Now, one of the other things with this model specifically, and really any of the NSN marked P-01s. You do have a lanyard loop here at the bottom. I honestly don't remember if this comes on the other CZ P-01s out there. I just know this one does. And we do have our NSN number here on the side. Now that is something you're not going to get with the Omega models. That's something unique to just the standard decocker only versions. And again, the NATO green model is going to be one that is decocker only as well. And again, that's kind of been my preference. My CZ P-09 has the Omega trigger system. I've tried it both ways with just decocker or with having it as a safety, and I've just really settled on decocker. I've gotten so used to that double action trigger that it's really not a liability for me, and I'd much rather have that than, again, a switch that makes the gun stop working where I can't even rack the slide anymore. And also, it's going to be thinner in this configuration, which is going to make it nicer for concealed carry. So before I jump into what my experience overall has been with this pistol, let's go ahead and roll in some more shooting footage with it, and then we'll dive into kind of my thoughts overall. Now, as I mentioned, I've been carrying this pistol for over a year now, and to me, the absolute most important thing on any gun I'm going to be trusting my life to, especially one that I have on me every single day, making it the most likely firearm for me to use in protection of my own life, is reliability. It needs to go bang every time I pull the trigger, and it needs to operate flawlessly, and it really can't be in question whether or not that's going to happen. Otherwise, it's not even worth consideration as a self-defense tool, in my opinion. And I can say, thankfully, and hopefully obviously if I've been carrying this gun for this long, that I have had zero reliability issues with this pistol at all. And I can also say I'm not super good when it comes to maintenance, so this thing has gotten pretty dirty. You've probably watched me throughout this video kind of wiping linty areas off of this gun. And it's just held up really, really well. It's such a smooth shooting gun. And again, that reliability has been key and has been unquestionable throughout this entire process. Now, one of the other things that really sold me on these pistols has been the accuracy of it. The first time I took this pistol out to shoot it, again, I knew I wanted to play with one. I didn't know if it was going to become my everyday carry gun or if it was just going to be one that gets added to my collection for a while. However, the very first time I took this to the range, I was shooting it more accurately than I was my Glock 19. For reference, my Glock 19 was the first pistol I purchased after turning 21. I've got easily over between 4,000 and 5,000 rounds through it. I've got a lot of trigger time with that pistol, and I was shooting this one more accurately out of the box than I do my Glock 19. That even with the, well, at the time I was a little bit more spotty with a double action trigger, but definitely in single action I was far more accurate. And some of you are going to say no duh, but again, I've got a lot of time with that Glock 19. Now, I wasn't shooting it as quickly, however, as time has gone on and I've got more time in with this, and again, especially with the double action trigger, I shoot this thing better than I do my Glock 19. I still have my Glock 19, but this has kind of usurped it as my go-to everyday carry gun. And as my everyday carry gun, another important feature is going to be carryability or concealability. Now, again, we're in a very similar silhouette to the Glock 19 as far as barrel length and grip length. However, due to the more gradual curves of this over the more boxy grips of the Glock 19s, which I don't hate, this is just going to conceal better. Clothing is going to drape over it better. And I just find that this conceals kind of across the board a little bit better. Now, it is a significantly heavier gun, being a metal frame. It's not a steel frame, thankfully, because otherwise the weight would be a lot more. But it is a much heavier gun to carry, even when we're talking completely unloaded. So it may not be for everybody. Again, really the way to find out is to actually get hands-on with one and see how it feels for you, and how it compares to your size. For reference, I'm 6'2", about 240 pounds. So this conceals just fine. Also, I work at a gun store, so if it does print a little bit, really not the end of the world. So again, do with that information what you will. If you're 5'1", 120 pounds, might be a little bit harder to get away with this thing. But honestly, Depends on how you carry, where you carry, and how good your holster is. But I find this thing to be very, very carryable as long as you're willing to deal with that weight. Now, overall, I just want to talk about the shooting experience that I've had with this. As I have kind of mentioned before, the recoil impulse on this thing is very, very smooth. Again, having that shorter slide and the less reciprocating mass makes this thing a real pleasure to shoot. Even my fiance, who is, again, a full foot shorter than I am and at that like 5'1" height, she was a little bit nervous to shoot a 9mm for the first time. We'd only been shooting my 22s a lot with her, getting her acclimated and getting those fundamentals down. She was a little bit intimidated to try shooting a 9mm, and even with her teeny tiny hands, she was able to get a hold of this pistol and able to handle the recoil of it very, very well. And then for people who are more experienced at shooting handguns, who can mitigate that recoil even better, this is just going to be an extremely pleasurable gun to shoot. And that's kind of been my overall experience with this, that it's just a far more refined gun. And while it's going to be harder for some people to use in that it has a double action, single action trigger, it's a heavier gun, etc., etc., if you are capable of taking advantage of the features it gives you, this is going to provide a much better shooting experience than one of the more basic like striker fired pistols out there. Now, there's nothing wrong with those striker fired pistols. Like I said, I still have my Glock 19 and I have a Glock Model 45 on my duty belt. So I am not opposed to those guns at all. But once you have the fundamentals down really well and you're ready to move on to something that's going to give you a better return on your skill level, I really think the CZ pistols allow you that ability to fully take advantage of your skills once you get them down. Now, I'm not trying to make it sound like I am the best shooter in the world, but I do have the opportunity to shoot a lot, and I've got a lot of trigger time on a lot of different guns, and this is the one that I feel allows me to utilize my skills the best. So at least in an everyday carry context. Again, when we're talking duty guns, it's going to be slightly different, but the gun that I'm going to have with me, most likely when I'm defending myself, I've decided that this is going to be that gun, at least for the time being. Now, again, it is not without its drawbacks. Again, we are talking about extra weight. We are talking about a gun that's going to be harder to actually get on the slide with. I know a lot of people have come up with their own workarounds for it. Some people are still able to just grip it and rip it. So it's going to come down to what you feel the most comfortable with as far as that goes. Again, we are talking about a double action trigger, which may be more difficult for people to shoot accurately. I have the benefit of using the Mantis X10 trainer, and that thing I need to do a video on. It has really drastically improved my ability to shoot a double action trigger accurately because I'm able to actively identify what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Again, video on that to come. It's been a tremendous tool to use. I honestly can't say enough good about those things, but again, that's going to be a topic for another video. And you are also dealing with a diminished capacity out of the box compared to, say, a Glock 19, SIG P320, CZ P10C. But with those MECR mags, you get right back to that 15+1, along with the ability to carry the full-size CZ75 mags as your backup mags. So you can jump up to 17, 18, or 19, depending on what kind of configuration they're in. So again, not a huge sacrifice there, but something that's still worth mentioning. And then kind of the other big drawback when it comes to CZ pistols is aftermarket support. There are companies, you know, CZ Custom Shop, you have the Cajun Gunworks guys, and there are some other companies that are giving you quite a good amount of support for these pistols. But when it comes to finding mags, finding holsters, barrels, sights, anything like that, it is going to be harder to find those things for this than it is going to be for your standard Glock 19s, again, SIG 320s, anything like that. However, there's not necessarily as much, in my opinion, you have to do. And again, for the guys who do like to invest a ton of money into their guns, my understanding is that the double action, single action, decocker only models have a tendency to polish up a little bit better than the Omega models. But again, your experience may vary there. So that kind of sums it up with this pistol. I'm a huge, huge fan of it. It's been an excellent pistol for me. I really can't sing its praises enough, and it's one that I really think you owe it to yourself to at least get some trigger time on. And on that note, I did do some filming with GB Guns up out of a little bit further north of here on this pistol with them. We put a bunch of different types of ammo through it as a reliability test and as well as an accuracy test. When they have that video up, I'll put a link down to that below. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, definitely hit me up in the comment section down below. I at least read every comment, even if I don't respond to it. And if I deem it appropriate to respond, I try to do that whenever possible. And I also want to say thanks to my patrons for making a video like this one happen. And once again, thanks to PMC Ammo for letting me get 1,000 rounds through this thing during the dark, dark times that have been 2021. So anyway, with all that being said, all that out of the way, I'm going to throw my O-light back on here, anger some people in the comments, and say, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.